So yes, the name of our panel is Building a Security Program in the Era of Generative AI. Hello, my name is Adam Marre. I'm the CISO of Arctic Wolf. It is my pleasure to be with you tonight, mainly because I am not a member of the panel. I just get to ask the questions and listen to their amazing, thought-provoking, insightful answers. I'm really excited for this conversation. All of you, please think of questions yourselves that you can ask the panel toward the end. We'll make sure that you have time to do so, and don't go easy on them. To set this up a little bit, everybody remembers, I know this is, I'm telling you what you already know, but back in November of 2022, OpenAI dropped a thermonuclear bomb on the world by releasing OpenAI to everyone to use it, and oh my gosh, it's gone crazy. Now, those of us who've been using ML and AI for a long time know that it's been around, it's been developing, but now all of a sudden it was put in a user-friendly way into the hands of everyone, and that has had implications for security programs in every company, business, organization that there is. So what we're going to talk about tonight is what's actually happening now in organizations, in companies. What are security leaders doing now to try to address this situation? And what do they think is coming, and what are they doing to prepare for the future? Does that sound good? Prepare to be amazed. All right. But let's introduce the panel first, and I'm going to let each one of them introduce themselves. We'll start with Susan.
Hi, I'm Susan Stewart. I'm the director of, IT risk management at Zions Bank. I just joined Zions about 2 months ago, so I'm brand new to that position, but enjoying it so far. Previously, I worked in the DC area for a long time, a lot of government contracts and a lot of consulting, auditing, and then have worked in the financial services space for several years. I worked as a financial regulator in DC, and then worked at Capital One, also in cyber risk management. I took a short break for 3-4 years, came to Utah and worked at a couple of startups in Lehigh, and then have found my way back into banking. So I'm sort of representing the risk-averse part of the panel, and I'll pass on to Matt.
Awesome. I love the energy at 8 p.m. at night. I was worried about this panel being like full of energy. I'm like, oh shoot, how are we going to make this awesome? And I'm glad it was right after the coffee break. So I'm Matt Hillary. I'm the CISO at Drata. I've been at a number of companies here in Salt Lake, and excited to be on this panel today.
Yeah, you really can't follow Matt Hillary. You just have to try to keep up. Brandon Greenwood. I'm CISO with Beyond, formerly known as Overstock.com. I have responsibility and accountability for enterprise IT, website operations, and of course cybersecurity. I also lead the task force at Beyond in AI and AI efforts that we're undertaking that hopefully we'll be able to maybe speak to a little bit this evening from a business perspective as well as security.
Awesome. We need to explain the chair situation because this might look weird from you guys out there.
No, so two of us, are weak-legged and have to use chairs, and the other two of us. No, I'm just kidding. They're looking for 2 more chairs. They don't know where they are, so we get to stand until they find the chairs. All right. Thank you, Matt. I guess it is a little weird with us standing here. I'm the bodyguard. All right. So maybe, Matt, since you've got the mic, we'll start with you. So how is generative AI, these tools that are basically ubiquitous in the hands of everyone and people are playing with and coming up with all these new plugins and tools and things, how is that changing the cybersecurity landscape, your cybersecurity program? What is changing? What are you doing differently? What do you think security leaders need to do differently to be able to deal with this? What's happening right now? Not what's going to happen in the future, but what's happening right now. What do you think?
Well, I want to start with this conference. I think the last 2 days have really opened my eyes to seeing what is now available for us to worry about. I think Mandy she got the CISO mind chart. She had a chart up here that said all the things that CISOs worry about in our role. And I think, in the last 24 hours or so, as the very technical talks have been given, realizing, oh my gosh, there are so many more things that we need to worry about with respect to this new technology that's been introduced to our world in a more material, more accessible way. And so as a security leader, realizing that is just, oh my gosh, another thing to add to the list to worry about, but also exciting. I think Mandy earlier talked about never stop learning, right? And so this is another exciting opportunity for us to continue to learn. When it comes to security programs, two tactical things we've done is one is obviously our employees' use of AI internally, and then the second one, nice, we got more chairs, sweet, now I don't feel so awkward up here sitting. So we have our employees' use of AI internally, right? Our marketing friends approached us and like, man, we want to be able to use this stuff to generate content. We want to be able to use this stuff to help accelerate our conversations with our SDRs and how they're doing sequences and kind of propagating our tool externally. So there's a lot of internal use of AI that we, in fact, Blake in the crowd, I think, talked, Blake Entrican mentioned, he's like, well, this is actually more of an acceptable use problem. So as part of your acceptable use policy, we added in a ton of content there to help drive and actually encourage our team members and employees to use this technology, which may be very different than I think some of the other customers I've talked with recently that are like, no, we're like perma-banning this stuff until we actually trust this stuff. So we're seeing that side of the spectrum as well. On our end, we're actually encouraging it and the responsible use of it by our team members, in all cases not putting any sensitive data into some of these tools. So that's one. The other facets on our product side, there's so many use cases for AI, especially with Drata specifically with compliance automation and helping accelerate that effort. Really automating the mundane and kind of sucky parts that we don't want to be doing, and what a phenomenal way to use this technology to help accelerate that. So I do know that when we've disclosed the use of AI providers to our customers, a lot of them have lost, I can't say it a better way, but a lot of them have come back with a lot of like, oh my gosh, opt out, I don't want to be a part of this, a lot of fun, a lot of concern there, we respect that, but it is kind of wild to see how kind of touchy the subject is. So, you know, in a lot of cases we're reverting to using a lot of internal capabilities to help build what we need to there, which means more effort. But anyway, we're encouraging that piece in a responsible way that still maintains the trust of customers. So anyway, I bring up those two facets, the internal use and then the product use that's been challenging for us and navigating that in all of its facets.
Brandon or Susan, want to add?
You're the risk side. I'll go after Susan.
Honestly, from the risk perspective, I'm not sure that a lot has changed. It seems just like a different iteration of the same types of risks that we're talking about. Is just the speed is changing, and we're just talking about it in slightly different ways. Yeah, but mostly from a governance perspective, it's the same types of conversations. What controls do we have over this? Are we considering who we're sharing our data with, and are we doing that in compliance with our existing policies, our existing frameworks? And it's kind of interesting just having those conversations with folks that want to use AI internally and build into the product. You know, it's really like not a groundbreaking conversation. It's the same conversation as potentially using another vendor and bringing them into your supplier risk management program, just a slightly different version of some of the questions. So that's been kind of interesting to see how it hasn't changed a lot of things. A lot of more apprehension probably and a lot more nerves around it, but not necessarily different questions.
Yeah, so the way that I have approached it, we have approached it, is I wear a lot of different hats. And more often than not, recently, it's been more about business enablement, right? How do we enable the business? How do we make sure they can do what they need to do, what they want to do? I think there's been a movement in security to not be the Department of No for several years. That's not really the approach that we have taken. We're trying to make sure that these tools are available within reason. And we started with, policy, right, to address as much as we could some of those risks, because we obviously wanted to make the business units aware and the individuals aware who would be using it. All right, these are the risks you need to consider. These are, and in addition to that, when it comes to generative AI, right, what prompt engineering you should be looking at, how you should be monetizing it, how you should be looking at the different tools from a generative AI perspective that might be able to help you do things like, I don't know, say marketing, co-pilot assistance, right? It's going to be interesting to kind of see, and I don't know if we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but we're talking about enabling the business, enabling maybe your security teams, especially I think with, when is it? I think Microsoft's putting out their co-pilot security in a couple of weeks, April sometime. So I think from that enablement perspective, being able to go to the business and say, all right, hey, we've given you these opportunities, we've given you these tools, being able to let them kind of experiment and play with it while we are trying to experiment and learn what we can, should, or shouldn't do, is presenting opportunities to allow the security team, which that's where I talk about a lot of hats. The main hat is on the security side, right? Definitely want to make sure that we are able to leverage those capabilities from an AI perspective. And what we plan to do, kind of the goal, the strategy around this is to say, all right, while we have these policies, you can have policies, but you've got to be able to enforce them. And that's really where things are going to kind of pick up for us, is we're looking at a lot of technologies right now that are going to continue to allow the business to do what they need to do, but also govern how they do it. So in other words, imagine a marketplace where folks familiar with Hugging Face and a few of us, all right, cool. So being able to go out and say, you know what, I'm in marketing, I'm in merchandising, I'm in whatever it is, right? Customer service is a little bit different, but I need to be able to do these things. Let me plug it into this particular tool, this marketplace, and you come back and tell me what LLMs or models I should be using. And then on the security governance side, what we can say is these LLMs or models, these are the ones that are okay for you to use. Some of the other ones we wouldn't allow, but then there's auditing capabilities. There's some other things that I think we'll probably talk about, but that's kind of the way that we have approached this, is first from a business enablement perspective, and then being able to get in and kind of say, all right, we've experimented with this is where we think we need to go, we're more mature in this space, let's start to kind of tighten things down a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so let's dig into this a little bit more right now, because I think if you're like me, and I've listened to a lot of podcasts, a lot of talks on this, and people say these concepts, we need to figure out how to use this safely, we need to figure out how to enable the business. Let's talk a little bit, if you don't mind, those of you who want to, like, share what are very specific things. Like, you got into the end there, Brandon, a little bit by saying, you know, you'll have folks actually come to you and say, we want to use something, and then you approve which LLMs they can use. So that's an example where there's a process. But how do you get people to actually use that process and not just run away with shadow IT? How do you make that happen and have them believe that you're not going to be the office of no? And then what are other measures like that are very specific that you can share about kind of how your programs are changing right now?
Yeah, if we go back and look at historically shadow IT, where that kind of came from, right? There were folks who came in from an operations perspective, maybe governance, maybe it was legal, but folks told them, you can't do this, you shouldn't use this, this is what we're licensed, whatever the case may be. And that's why people said, well, you know what? This doesn't work for me. I'm going to go out and do this a little bit differently. I'm going to put it on a credit card, or maybe it was free. They didn't need to, but it's out there. Where we have, and I think where we as an industry, where we as a profession are kind of changing that, is we're saying, okay, let us give these things to you so you don't have to go out and do that. Now we're going to need to come back on the back end of this and make sure that just in case you're not doing something that we haven't allowed, right? So even though we're saying, let us give you as much as you need, but kind of filter or block, make it so you can't use some of these other capabilities or tools, we got to have visibility into that. We've got to have detective and preventative controls to take care of that. So the way that we're handling it right now is, everybody familiar with kind of like the Z-scaler or reverse proxies and things like that? We're basically taking categories where they exist with different tooling that we use, and we're saying, all right, we want to, when we get to this point, these are the things we're likely going to want to block, but we need to allow first. So what we're doing is we're going out and we're saying, all right, you tell us what you need. And we'll have an onboarding process, whatever your ticketing system is, whether it be through ServiceNow or something else. What do you want? What are the things that maybe the security team or the board or our senior executives want to enable or make available, for our associates? So we go out and we make those available. Now you tell us what you want. What are you going to use? And that's where I think shadow IT becomes the biggest problem, is when you just say no arbitrarily and there might not really be any risk with it. And what we want to do is we want to say, all right, bring it to us. Tell us if there's something that we don't already have in this marketplace. And if there's nothing wrong with it, or even if it's maybe a little bit sketchy, I got to be careful there a little bit. But if there's nothing wrong with it, we're going to go ahead and allow it. If there's something kind of sketchy with it, what can we do to make sure that if maybe there are some issues or challenges around privacy, or maybe the way that the LLM is taking the data, or there's not a lot of good information on how they use that data, what are the things that we wouldn't, from a business or personal perspective, want them to learn on, right? We maybe wouldn't want them to learn on customer data. Maybe we don't want to send payment information, specific types of code, intellectual property, those types of things. This is where it gets interesting. I see a question. Give me 1 second. This is where it gets interesting, because not only do you make that marketplace available, but do we, and what we're working with right now is a third party who, and there's a little bit of trust with this, we're working with a third party who we are sending all of those requests through, right? So think of this as a reverse proxy, very similar to what something like Zscaler is. Somebody goes out and says, all right, I'm going to use this model from Hugging Face. We'll just say ChatGPT. We'll just use that for sake of argument. And I'm going to put this customer information in there, and I want you to write me a code snippet that's going to take these pieces of the customer information, import them maybe into this database over here, whatever the case may be. We don't want that customer information to go in there. So we're working with this third party to say, all right, we're going to send you this data. There's a level of trust here. We're going to send you, all of our requests are going to go through you. And we're going to filter that. We're going to at least make sure that the categories of models that we're using are above board. The data that we're sending to you, we kind of authorize for you to just be looking for these particular things. And if everything matches up, you can use maybe some of the riskier models as well, if we're not sending information or data in that we don't want sent there. This is a process, though. I mean, this is something we started, it was probably 8 months ago, and I mentioned the task force that I'm leading. This is kind of what this is culminated and where it's leading us to, is kind of delivering this. And we're pretty close. We're pretty close to where I want to be. But there is some inherent risk, and we're going to figure that out as we go. Just because there's some inherent risk with it doesn't mean we shouldn't do it, is kind of my opinion. I saw a question back here.
Yeah, so sounds like you're doing like a CASB play on generative AI?
It is a little bit like that. Yeah, we're looking at it as kind of the reverse proxy. I mean, some CASBs are reverse proxies. That's kind of what this is, right? Those requests, the marketplace kind of has to go through there. We partner with this third party. They provide those capabilities to us. We then, what it also allows us to do is we can say, these individuals that might be over in this particular business unit, these are the things they can do. We want to be very careful with that and not restrict too much. But then also, somebody coming in and getting a particular role for a business unit, we want to just give that to them right out of the box. Hey, here's what you've got. Here are the model. If you're doing this in your business unit, you need to use AI for something, here's what you've got. I mentioned the onboarding process. If you need to bring something in, get a ticket in, we'll take a look at it and kind of go from there. But yeah, it's essentially like a reverse proxy, but we're just, Zscaler, I think everybody kind of understands that a little bit better, you know, some of those gateway salute. That's basically all this is. And being able to add the marketplace on top of that is really, I think, the differentiator for some of the other tools that are kind of in this governance space. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
How much of that relies on busting the TLS open?
Pardon?
How much of that relies on busting the TLS open?
All of it. All of it. So, yeah, I mean, if you're using some of these proxies, these gateways anyway, I mean, you're probably doing that already. So if you don't have that capability, it would probably make things a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, thanks. We have a question here.
Yeah, in that context, as you were talking, it strikes me that we are dealing with, at least in my perspective, what amounts to first generation production models.
100%.
And as it goes along, and I love some of the presentations that we've watched, going, oh, geez, that's pretty freaking vulnerable, to all sorts of different injection concepts, you know, the prompt injections, and they're substantively this first gen stuff, and we're starting to build off of those, and companies are adopting that. In my mind, they're going to start being tied to those models, because that's what they built their applications on, is these models. Where do you think the future is as we start to understand there's all these inherent biases and things that are coming out over time, and now companies are building applications on these original models? Your thoughts on that, and then do you think there is a process by which companies are looking at their models and going, okay, this one's Gen 1, now we got to start over knowing what we know about those vulns, knowing about the biases, knowing about the data issues, and we're going to redo it over here?
I love.
Let me open up to the panel. So
No, you first, man.
Got to get more of the panel. I can
Yeah.
answer it, but I got Adam yelling at me.
we need to get some more people on the panel a chance. Do you want to talk about
You
it
want to go for
matter?
next one? All right.
Or just give it back to Brandon?
I first want to admire Brandon's Metallica shirt underneath this suit. You look sharp up here. This is awesome. Sorry to track. This is awesome. And I think all of us want to get to a point where we can trust a lot of the models that are being generated for the purpose that they're being used, right? And so I do see that next generation as building upon existing ones. I don't know, that may be a super naive answer. It may be one that's like, again, a hopeful answer to get to a point where you do have vetted models that you are using for certain use cases that are trusted in some shape or form. Now, how we get to that level of trust, I think we talked about some of the mechanisms that do that now. Again, that's just my total raw answer there. I don't. You had a second answer though, or a second question there, right, Vince?
Well, it was based on the fact that we know that some of these models are inherently flawed in some way. And if we try to iterate on that, we're going to basically be patching.
Yeah.
And we know from security, that's my world, bad idea, let's actually fix the architecture.
Yeah.
Do you think that's something that companies are doing, or are we blindly, forward and going to see what it's like?
We're probably more the latter today, based off of the talks that were given the last couple of days. It was pretty impressive. I think yesterday there was a talk, very technical. I can't remember the individual's name, but basically talking about, hey, like, you can actually embed stuff into models that may be discovered later, right? And you're like, oh shoot, like you go back and fix that. I don't know how you actually technically go back and fix that. In fact, a lot of the things caused me to have to go back and relearn or learn new things to understand some of the concepts that were brought up there. So I'm still learning there. I don't know, but that's where I'd start.
Just one thing I'd add is that, the LLMs are just a different iteration of models that exist out there right now, right? Banking and financial sector use financial modeling for decades now, and there's model risk associated with that that's been in place and is operating regularly in those institutions. There's regulations that have been implemented on those because the data is biased, because people can't get in certain classes, or races can't get approved for a mortgage because the data that the models is based on is biased. So it's not a new concept that we have to fix these models over time and that there's going to be problems with the data.
So Brandon gave a great answer about some things he's doing today, right now, to deal with this. So I wanted to give you a chance, Matt, to talk about what's something that you're specific, that you and your security program are doing today to deal with all of these issues.
Yeah, no, I wanted to build on your answer because I think it was awesome to say, hey, you focus heavily on the models. I think one of the things that we're doing is we actually have like a browser extension in our browsers that we use internally that will detect the use of new third-party SaaS apps in general. And as part of that, we're capturing that. And once that gets identified, like someone logs in or creates a new account on something, whether it be free or whether it be paid, it will detect that. And then our IT team, and I think you manage your IT team as well, right? Yes. And so same here. So our IT team, we're very customer-centric internally. We want to enable the business to grow. We want to enable the business to continue to just accelerate as fast as it can. We're a very high-growth company. And so as part of that, the IT team has built a lot of automation and detection. And these things will pop up. It'll create a ticket for them to review and say, hey, this new thing was signed up by X person in Y department. And we use that, and then that goes and flows through our procurement process and vetting process that the security team then does. So we're really trying to run as fast as the other parts of the business. The second is on the procurement side, we've made the procurement process as quick as possible to go through all the stage gates that you would expect to see, legal, finance approval, business approval, security and privacy and compliance approval. And so as part of that, we've tightened up. You can't go willy-nilly buy software on your corporate card. You can't do that. The purse strings are tightened so much that you have to kind of go through this process to procure something unless you're buying it with your own money. And so that's really helped guide folks through this process. We tried to make it as seamless as possible to really adopt these things. Now, when AI comes to the table, there's a second part, which has been third parties that provide AI platform use for our own product. That has been interesting because a lot of folks have not yet passed our level of compliance that we would expect to see. We usually require some level of SOC 2 Type 1 or Type 2 or some level of like third-party attestation that says these folks really are caring for a lot of the processes that are out there. So we give a lot of weight to those. Now just know that when we brought several to the table to discuss, many of those have not yet gotten to that point, and that's been frustrating because we're like, man, this is such a cool platform. This seems to be really doing what we wanted to do here, but it's not yet past that. And so that's been a fun kind of risk-based decision to say, well, this is our customers' data. What would they want us to do in this situation? So a lot of conversations are driven around kind of that third-party risk element where people come to the table and are not yet at the standard that we would like them to be, even though their tech and capabilities are really awesome right now.
Now, Susan, you come from a risk-averse organization, as you said, a bank.
Yep.
Share with us what the view I'm curious, the view that sort of your company has had about generative AI, and then maybe something specific that you've done to deal with it.
Yeah, I've just arrived at Zions, so I'm still getting up to speed, but it is definitely slower than a startup where it was previously, and definitely risk averse. So it's we're going with trusted vendors that we're already working with that are offering LLMs and different features. I mean, we're talking with Microsoft and established partners that we feel like we can trust, that we already know what their model is for handling our data. We know that it's protected because it's built into a lot of the products we're already using. Generally, that's what I've seen so far, and my team has been really trying to help highlight the risks and understand so that our management can understand what those risks are, how we're mitigating them, how this is acceptable for the business, how this is going to help enable the business. I think we talk a lot about just like loss of confidentiality or bias in the data, or our users not using the tools appropriately, but the other side of the risk is also, are we going to get the value out of these tools if we're paying a per user license fee every month? And do we really feel like our users are actually going to use it the way that it's intended to be used, and that we're going to realize that value? Because it isn't cheap, those licensing fees.
All right, so let me ask this question. A lot of people, there's been a lot, of talks here where we've broken the models, broken through some of the safeguards, and so, we're playing with these, and researchers are playing with these models. But I'm wondering, as real security, actual security leaders today, a couple of questions here. One, what are you actually afraid of with AI right now? What is AI enabling? The tools that are available to people today, what are you actually afraid of happening? Not the maybes, but like what actually puts fear in you today? And then two, have you actually seen attacks that have been powered or helped by AI come at your organizations right now?
That doesn't mean I'm starting. Man, phishing still is so freaking effective, especially like in our case, just recently did a red team exercise with a provider here, and they were able to find a way in, and it was actually, they had to get pretty crafty to get our folks to actually do something. And we have many of our apps behind FIDO2 locked in, so instead of making phishing effective, we've focused on how do we make it ineffective by introducing a lot of our kind of token-based kind of authentication pieces for a second factor. Well, we have some apps that we still allow people to do out-of-band push, and they found those, and they were very crafty. And so I don't know if they used AI to generate some of these crafty emails, but they had multiple iterations, and some of them were so crafty that duped a couple of our folks, right? And it's just super frustrating now to see how effective that is on that front, and we're still trying to allow convenience with people accessing some of these tools. I know there's some easy ways to make that happen, and again, just open and vulnerably disclosing that, we're working on our own security posture in some ways, and that's one thing that I think just making those phishing emails even more and more crafty than they were before. What scares me, though? There's a lot.
You keep thinking, Matt.
Have you seen that movie Megan? Is that what it's called, Megan? That scares the shit out of me. That's what scares me. Something.
So sentient robots.
Yeah.
What scares
you?
No,
with I won't say within my control, but the things that we're seeing day to day. I'll give you some of the business things that concern me, and then maybe some of the security on the business side, where our business units are using AI to generate content that's customer facing. Think reviews. Everybody's kind of seen Amazon, where they have customers have thought this and that based on the reviews. This is kind of how they rate that product. Well, if any abuse happens there, maliciously or otherwise, maybe somebody doesn't do the right prompt engineering and fouls something up, you get the wrong data in there, you're going to be sending maybe potentially some things that might not get folks to buy your product, or might not get them to come to your website anymore because you're giving them a bunch of bad data, or maybe information that might be not in line with maybe their political leanings. These are, you go back to, what was it? It was Anheuser-Busch thing. I mean, if somebody says or does something that doesn't jive with a particular group, that has a real business impact. So those are some of the things I'm worried about on the business side. Now, I haven't had the opportunity, unfortunately, to be here to see some of what I have heard has been great talks and demonstrations on some of the ways that we can abuse AI. But some of what I have seen with AI right now, and I think we're early on, and maybe to your point, we're Gen 1. And a lot of the attacks right now that I've seen that have been, that's super cool, that's really neat, the kind of the eye-catching stuff are the things that you put in as a prompt, and then it gives you something back. It's not really something you can send against, Christian or somebody, Christian might be able to figure that out. He's probably already got it figured out. But those things that are more, that we see more often than not, that are they only affect one person, that's not as scary for me, but it's not something that I'm worried about. But the things that go into manipulating the data, I'll give you an example. I'll be quick, Adam, I'll be quick. So a vendor sent me something, this has probably been 6, 7, maybe 2 months ago, said, hey, we copied your website, which is cool, but we've also put our little chat bot on it down here. Okay, let me go check this out. Check the chat bot, they were pimping AI. So I went out and I kind of looked at it and I said, okay, what colors, it called me John. First thing, I was like, how do you know my name is John? Couldn't really give me an answer back or anything like that. So I said, okay, what color is the sky? So the sky is blue, sky is blue. I said, okay. Well, it's really not, and I can't remember exactly the specifics, but by the end of the discussion with this bot, it ended up thinking an option, would say, it's cloudy, it's gray, it's clear, it's blue. By the end of this discussion that I had with the AI, it said, it can be purple too. So I was like, all right, let me leave this, go into an incognito, bring it back up, ask what colors the sky can be at any one time. It said purple. And I said, okay, maybe it's just associating that with my IP, have my buddy go in and say, interact with this, ask it what colors the sky could be. Purple was one of the options. So I think those are the things that if we implement it incorrectly and somebody injects that data on our side, those are the things that make me nervous.
All the Black Mirror episodes are starting to come to mind about all the scary things that kept me up the night after watching some of those. I know I already talked, but I was going to mention one of the things that just concerns me is, I totally lost the thought there, Brandon. You're killing me. I'm totally dying. It's Megan. Oh gosh. But just thinking about being able to put together a dossier. I know when folks do red team or pen tests against an organization, the first thing they do is actually, hey, how do I want to hack this company? Where are the things I want to attack? Where are the soft spots? Who are the IT folks? Who am I going to go fish? Who am I going to, or what does their perimeter look like? And so they're using a lot of these tools out there to identify using open source intelligence. I think this is a great use case. We're seeing some of those. I think you mentioned, was it White Rabbit Neo? And a few others that got brought up as well, as far as products out there that as a CISO, I'd love to be able to see today, how is my perimeter looking? How are my internals looking? The whole defense in depth and zero trust idea, where do we sit? Just like I look down at the dashboard of my car saying how fast I'm going, I want to be able to see every day, how do I stand today against the world and those who want to attack us. And so using both on the defensive side as well as the offensive side, but more on the offensive side saying, man, what is the best way to go after and hack this company? To be able to do that quickly now with some of these tools that are available today. Now, have I seen that yet? In some cases, yes, it's not as effective and not totally. But I do hope it gets to a point we can use that and turn it to more defensive than the offensive.
Susan, you want to share? Fears.
Yeah.
Fears, risks, attacks.
Honestly, one of the things that I've been, I'm mostly worried about is I feel like all the LLMs are so useful and have so much potential to be used for good in our businesses and provide that business value. I mean, we talked about marketing, just generating ad copy, all of that kind of stuff that will make people's lives so much easier. One of the things I worry about is we definitely are looking into using it for documenting security, doing security documentation, doing controls, doing risk commentary, that type of thing. And that would be so useful because that's so challenging for so many people. And one of the things I'm worried about is that we're going to over-rely on it. I think that there's so much hype in the last year about ChatGPT and all of these tools and what they can do for you. And I'm not sure that we're seeing that delivered immediately and seeing that value as much as we would like. So I'm a little bit worried that we're going to start subscribing to these things and touting them as this silver bullet that's going to solve all of our documentation problems and help us be smarter and more efficient. And really, it's going to produce bad documentation, and we do need to review everything and still have that human element.
Thank you.
What about you?
Yeah.
What about me?
Yeah.
What I'm worried about today is something, because this actually happened to me. Now, it wasn't the full attack, but it really happened to me. I'm sitting in my office, I get a phone call, and on the other end of the phone is a crying voice of a young man that says, "Dad?" And I say my son's name, Max, and he says, "Dad?" And then I hear some rustling, and another voice gets on the phone. And it's an older man, and he says, "Sir, we have your son." And he proceeds to tell me that I need to pay him so that I can get my son back. Now, they weren't using a deep fake voice, and after about 10 seconds of me freaking out and every barrier that I've built up over my life in security breaking down and me just wanting to save my son, they all came back up because I had a couple things in my pocket. One was my son was actually in Bolivia, so I know he wasn't downtown at the nearest Smith's. And two, I'm a trained professional, so I took a deep breath and realized this was a scam. But those deep fake voices, I have heard them. They are amazing. They need less than 30 seconds. They sound very realistic. And I have investigated enough BEC cases to be freaked out that this is happening today. And it's going to be supercharged. So if companies, including my own, don't have good policies and procedures to defend against people using video calls, it was mentioned earlier today, voice calls, all of those things, you are going to transfer money to places that it shouldn't go. You're going to lose money as a business. It is going to happen. And that's not to mention all the disinformation and misinformation that's going to be created in this very fraught year we have ahead of us. So is that a good enough fear for you, Matt?
Yeah, no, that's, you got me scared now. And we all know that you would have taken the taken approach there. You would have said,
I do have a particular set of skills.
yes, I say, 100%.
Yeah, we have a question here. And yeah, this is question time now because we're close to the end, so it's going to be open for questions. So yes, sir.
Yeah, something to add on to that. A lot of AI is going into generative deepfakes, video deepfakes, for example. And the biggest section that's being used for that right now is pornography on that side. Now, they can take a picture of your face, and they can generate anything they want from that point. Do you guys see it as a concern for people in your company that now when someone comes to ransom you, they actually have deepfake evidence of it that they can spread around? Because usually you get emails that say, hey, we have videos of this, but you know it's fake, they really don't. But now they're going to be sending emails, hey, we actually have evidence of this, and it's going to be deepfaked.
Yeah, so you're talking about basically the artificial sextortion. So the old school sextortion, they got to actually get the pictures that you wouldn't want out there. This is one that's, created by AI. Of course that's coming, but panel, does anybody want to opine on that?
Throw it? Okay, I'll throw this. All right. So I love this question. Sometimes, from what I have heard, I'll just, a guy I know, sometimes you might have members of a senior leadership board, whatever it is, who are like, yeah, it's great in theory. It looks good on the news and these types of things. If you want to get buy-in on this, right, and really kind of say, this is not something you see on the news and that, only a few folks in the room can do, go out. It's real easy to do. Generate a deep fake on one of your board members or your CEO. Take it to them, say, hey, here's what we're working on, and here are the things that we need to address as it relates to AI, and here's how it can be used maliciously. You're going to get people's attention, from what I heard, real quick.
Next to all hands.
Pardon?
Are you insinuating we should sextortion
No, do not do sextortion.
Yeah, I wouldn't create pornography of one of your
Use it in the
board
next all
members or
hands.
executives. But yeah, we have a question here in the middle.
It's great that there's highly risk-averse organizations on, and then very, I don't want to call it risk positive, but willing to take risks. And what keeps you up at night? But my question kind of comes from you saying that your organization is risk-averse, that you work with these trusted vendors. But how is it that you were going to use LLMs and look at LLMs to see if those trusted organizations are using
think that's a really difficult thing to do. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the same question for any vendor, right? Like, how do you know that they're actually fulfilling their contractual agreements? That's incredibly difficult to do, and I think most companies probably aren't. I mean, privacy is such a hard thing to govern and understand even. There's so many different facets of it that it's just it's so difficult, but ultimately it comes down to contractual agreements and being able to follow up on those as soon as you discover that something has been used outside of those terms, and being aggressive with that, and doing the verifications that you can in your vendor risk management processes. But yeah, there is that level of trust that you have to ultimately go with them. I think it's really difficult to detect if they're going to be using your data in ways that they are not supposed to be.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I mean, this is a problem that goes way beyond AI. That's great. We need to end at 9:05, is that correct? Yeah, we have 2 minutes. So thank you, everybody. You've been an incredible audience. Thank you for the questions. But I wanted to give each of our panelists just 30, 45 seconds to kind of give some closing thoughts on AI, how you're using it, and what the future holds.
First, thanks to the folks who put everything on. Appreciate the invite. Appreciate having an opportunity to be up here on the panel with these folks. Appreciate everyone attending. I'd like to go back to this gentleman's comment on this first gen. I think we're going to see more of this, and it's going to escalate. It's going to increase in sophistication. It's going to increase in maliciousness. This is horse and buggy. This is the first Ford. Right? Eventually, we're going to get to the Lamborghinis, the Teslas, the Rivians, and when we get there, we need to be prepared. So I think as much as we can get in, understand as much as we can, learn about it, identify ways to use it, both how it's being used for bad and how we can use it and leverage it is probably the better way to say that for good. I think it's really going to put us in a better position in the future. AI isn't going to, you've heard this, AI isn't going to take people's jobs. It's going to, people who know how to use AI are going to be who takes people's jobs.
Likewise, want to appreciate the setup here. Also, I invited all of you to be a part of this, and I appreciate accepting that invite originally about a month or so ago. So thank you for being here. It was fun to be up here with you and to learn from you. For me, I think when cloud service providers came out, originally I used the analogy like, hey, cloud service providers can be the rope that helps you climb or the rope that you can hang yourself with. And I think the same applies to AI and just being able to understand what things will help us continue to climb. I also feel like it's an opportunity cost that if you don't embrace it in a safe way to help you climb, I think you might be left behind there as well. So I have that fear as well. That's me. Thanks.
The last thing I guess I would say is that I'm really interested in is the regulation side. I'm super interested in just Biden's executive order and the stuff that's coming out from that this month. At the end of the month, I think it's Treasury is giving their requirements for financial services and the expectations for security and specifically. So I'm really interested in that and just seeing whether, it's really going to be impactful or, a lot of times the regulation follows, of course. And so, that's what I'm looking forward to.
Great, thank you. Let's give it up for our panelists.
Thanks, Adam.
And thanks, everybody. This was great.
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, thanks for